Hey guys, Brandon Forcino here, Ordinary Time Catholic Podcast. So great to have you here with me today. I'm excited for today's episode. I'm actually here on site at Barton Productions in Jacksonville, Florida, to interview today's guest, Joe Helow, executive producer of The Real Presence, an amazing 28-minute documentary that helps everyone see exactly what's happening at Mass. It's a life-changing documentary. I'm so excited to be interviewing Joe. Joe's going to share a lot about this documentary, the process behind it, why this matters. And so thank you so much for joining us. Without further ado, I'd love to introduce you to our guest today, though, Joe Helow. Joe, thank you so much for being here with me.
Thank you for having me on the show, Brandon.
Yeah, a little different. So I started off the podcast with my own studio where we were bringing guests in and interviewing. And then I thought, I'd like to take the show on the road and start going to the people that I want to interview. I thought it'd be a little different. And so you recommended this production studio, which is super cool that we get to be here, and the environment of the people that produced this movie. I think it's just really cool, full circle moment here.
Well, we had to interview Jesus in this same studio. Father Mac Hill played the role of Jesus for us at the consecration.
Wow.
And so that's the only scene in the movie that was actually filmed in this same room where we're meeting today.
So Joe, first, why don't you kick things off by explaining this documentary and really just going into the backstory, how this came to life, how you got together with the Barton production crew. Give us a little introduction on this film.
So Jane Lanier is a lady that does development in Jacksonville. And one day she called me and told me that she was volunteering, helping the Bartons with a project. And she asked if it would be okay if we set up an appointment for her to bring them to my office to discuss a project that they had. And so if you know Jane, it's hard to tell her no. So we set up an appointment and the Bartons came over, and they described to me the situation where the Pew study had been done a couple years earlier. And their study showed that only about a third of Catholics believed in the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist. And because of that, they felt compelled to try and do a documentary on the real presence. And they described their project to me that they wanted to undertake. I was sitting there wondering why they were describing all this to me. I had never invested in a movie before. I had never expressed an interest in doing a movie. Really didn't know anything about the making of a movie, but I listened. And at the end of the conversation, when ordinarily it would have probably have been the time to say, well, thank you, but I'm not interested, for some reason I just blurted out, well, let's pray about it. So I took it to prayer. And so as I prayed about it and reflected about it over the next week or two, the thing that became very clear to me was that people that don't know that Jesus is really present in the Blessed Sacrament don't know that because they don't know what's really happening during the Mass. And it's the same reason that people don't go to Mass every Sunday, or it's the same reason people would leave the Catholic Church to go to another Christian church. They really don't understand what it is we're doing. So what really came to me in prayer was, yes, there does need to be a documentary, there does need to be a project on the real presence, but it needs to focus on the Mass, what happens at the Mass, and explains the Mass. Then you've heard musicians sometimes say, the song just came to me. I never really knew what that meant. But in prayer and adoration, the movie just came to me. And I just became very aware of different things that happen invisibly during the Mass that I felt it would be very important to try and show visibly what those things are, because if people could see what's really happening invisibly during the Mass, they'd have a much greater understanding about the Mass in general. And so I called Jane back and set up another appointment with the Bartons. And I told them that if they were willing to change their project a little bit and make the focus of the project the Mass and showing what happens visibly and invisibly at every Catholic Mass, I'd be very interested in being a part of their project. And so they looked at me and they go, sure, we'll do that, but how are we going to show that? And I looked at them and I go, I'm not sure yet. But that's where faith had to kick in a little bit.
And some really good editors, because this film features some really amazing features and elements that really do bring the invisible nature of what's happening, the divine, the heavenlies, and bring it to life.
So we had a priest in our diocese that our previous bishop sent to San Diego to study filmmaking for a couple of years. And so we called him in and he sat at our first few meetings. And he's the one that introduced us to the concept of using AI and augmented reality to create the invisible, if you will. And he put us in touch with some specialists in that field. I believe one was in Spain and one was in Italy.
Wow. That
we ended up subbing some of the work out to try and get the initial stuff going with the augmented reality. And so it was through that priest that we got, so we've seen the Lord at almost every step in the movie put people in our way or in our path to help us accomplish what we didn't know at the beginning quite how we were going to accomplish it.
Yeah, and to tag on to that, first of all, the cast, the cast that you got for this documentary is world class. I mean, not only the editors from different parts of the world, but the people featured in this film, from Scott Hahn to Bishop Polmeyer, Father Mike Schmitz, and I'm thinking to myself, how in the world did they get all of these people in one movie? How did you do that?
So if you go back to 2012, Bishop Estevez started a Eucharistic Congress in our diocese that we had every year while he was the bishop. And he asked me to be the speakers chairman of the Eucharistic Congress. So it was my responsibility every year for about 10 years in a row to get the speakers for the different tracks in the Eucharistic Congress. So I ended up inviting almost everybody that was in the movie at one time or another to come and speak at the Eucharistic Congress. So I knew them, I had their contact information, and so I like to think that maybe God was planning this project through that period of time that I ended up getting very familiar with them. Then as we decided that that was going to be part of the project, we realized it was going to be very expensive to go all the way around the country interviewing all these speakers for the project. This would have been in the fall of 2023. We realized that in the summer of 2024, the National Eucharistic Congress was going to be in Indianapolis, and that most of these well-known Catholic speakers were all going to be in Indianapolis for that event. So we contacted the committee of the National Eucharistic Congress, explained our project to them, and they helped us to arrange a studio in the Media Center Hotel that they used to bring in and interview all the speakers during the Eucharistic Congress. So we had a studio, so in advance we got in touch with the speakers, and we had a schedule of when they would come to the studio, and 80% of the speakers that are in the movie, we actually filmed them all in Indianapolis.
This is amazing to think of the orchestration of this and how much the Lord was obviously a part of this. Because the movie process, to make the movie, produce it, edit it, it was around 2 years total to make this movie come to life, right?
Yeah, a year and a half probably.
Year and a half. But like you said, I love what you said about this was actually more like 10 years of seeds being planted, you being consistent in adoration, having these people come to you. I love stories like this where we can see God's plan coming together over a course of a decade or more or less. And to see that even God would go even a step further and say, you know what, let's bring everyone together at this time, at the right time, at the perfect time, for the very reason you made this movie, to celebrate the Eucharistic revival.
Well, let me start by saying that, in my opinion, our Lord was the executive producer of this movie, not Joe Helow. I know nothing about making a film. I have no experience in making a film. I'm not even on social media or know anything about most of the things that now with the marketing of the film. But I can tell you that every time there's an obstacle, it's been amazing to watch how we've just prayed them away and doors have opened, and you can just see God's hand really in the whole project from its inception to the conclusion, and even continuing with the marketing of it to this day, and how I'm just kind of playing along or along for the ride and doing what he asked me to do along the way, but he's opening all the doors and he's really doing most of the work.
That's so beautiful. So let's talk a little bit about some of these obstacles, because I don't think I've ever interviewed anybody on this podcast or have met anybody who's doing something extraordinary for the Lord, and they make it look like this is so great. Look at all the bells and whistles. This thing is flawless. But no one really ever gets to hear the backstory of really what it took to get there. So what are some of these behind the scenes moments of this film?
So let me start by telling you that at the beginning of the project, I knew that if we were successful with the project, it would be very, very powerful for the kingdom of God. And if that was the case, Satan wasn't going to like this project at all. So I warned the Bartons when we started the project that we were going to need to protect ourselves, we're going to need to really pray through it, and that we would be under attack from the very beginning. And I would say that being aware of that from the beginning doesn't make it any more fun when those things happen, but at least you're very aware throughout the whole thing, and you're expecting and you're prepared for what's about to happen. But even I wasn't prepared for the very first thing that happened, which was about a month after we agreed to do the project. John Barton has a heart attack.
Oh my gosh.
John's the director of the project. So the attacks began right away, and they continued right up through the very end. I had attacks with my business and work. There were attacks with the actual production and making of the film, with the equipment. Sometimes things for unexplainable reasons would stop working. Just all kinds of things that happened throughout the process. I remember at one of the meetings that we had, where I was meeting with John and Mike, and we were doing some of the editing, John said, when this is over, I could write a book just on the attacks that we've encountered and endured through the making of the film. So one of the things that I did is I asked my wife to write a prayer that I tried to pray every day from the day we started the project or the day she completed the prayer through the end of the project until its completion. And part of the prayer was asking God to help us to overcome the obstacles that Satan would put in our way, and really to protect us and to protect all the people working on the film. And
wow.
It was just something that we knew was coming, and that we had to protect ourselves and be ready for it.
You know, that's really, if more people understood the importance of knowing your opponent. Because, you know, here's the thing, and I liken it to this. You know, I know that very well, right? A good boxer doesn't go into the ring without studying his opponent. They can anticipate the jabs, they can anticipate the stance, they can really study every part of what they're going up against. And if Christians had that same approach and mentality, you know, I think a lot of Christians don't just miss that the Eucharist really is the real presence of Jesus. I think a lot of Christians in general don't actually give credit that there is an opponent, there is an enemy who's trying to keep us out of the game.
It's one of the things that Satan does most effectively is try and get people to believe that he doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Because if you don't think that he exists, then you don't think that hell exists, then you don't think there's any consequences to any of your actions, then you're able to basically live the life you want and do what you want and think it's okay.
Yeah, and it's, oh man, to hear you talk about this back behind the scenes, and I get chills thinking about the prayer that your wife wrote. I mean, this is so much more than like even a production team. Like thinking about your family's involvement in this. How did this transform your family first? Because I mean, this film is officially out there. We're going to talk about that, but first, you all are transformed internally, right? Talk about the transformation that took place with your family.
Well, I would say that the thing that I've noticed most about this film with our family is that I'm having to rely on my kids for suggestions on how to market it. Mm-hmm. It's dinner conversation all the time. Have you called this person, Dad? What about this? Dad, did you see how many likes that, So there's conversation going on about it. When we were editing the film, and I can't tell you how many different edits and copies there were to go through and to look at, the Bartons would send it to me on a Dropbox, and I'd come home and my kids would help me put it up on the TV, and then we'd go through it, and then I'd have a pad and paper and I'd be making notes, and then my wife, my kids, everybody would be, change this, don't do this, do this. So everybody had a little bit of input into it, which was kind of a coming together again. That's as so far cool. As getting input. And so, it's just one more thing for us to do together, to talk about, to have fun with a little bit. Some of our kids that are on social media are coming up with ideas and suggestions for what to do to help get the film out there more. So it's interesting, the dynamic that it's kind of created in the family.
Yeah, because this is one of the struggles. I bring that up for this reason. One of the struggles of a layperson that, you've already mentioned, you have another job. You have another life. Like this isn't your work. It's not your industry. So I find that that's very encouraging, because and again, this is the whole purpose I started Ordinary Time Catholic Podcast was there's, again, I think I want there to be an emphasis that the lay people have a big role to play. And I've said this over and over again, but my father-in-law shared with me a long time ago, I was actually discerning to be a pastor. I was in seminary. And I remember when I was going through my Master's of Divinity program at Gordon Conwell, my father-in-law looked at me one day and he says, "Brandon, don't you know you can make more of an impact in the pew than the pulpit?" And I remember thinking, like, what are you talking about? That's not, of course not. You can't do that. And it's only recently that I really started to understand what he meant and how true that was. And you look at the catechism about how we're supposed to go into our ecclesial communities, bringing the gospel in the ways that the priest or bishop just can't. So that can lead to one thing, right? Going off and trying to do this like evangelism and doing ministry, and you forget your family, right? So one of the things I look for is not only to encourage people, hey, you have a part to play, right? Ordinary Time is all about the extraordinary things that God wants to do with the everyday, ordinary layperson. But if you're called and your vocation is to marriage and to being a father or a mother, how can you incorporate your family into the work that God's called you to do? So this is one of the first times I've heard a story like this that really brings the family into this, because I don't know if you can relate to that, but for a lot of my life professionally, I always view that as, nope, that's my work. Family's over here. I don't bring it home. Work and then pray. But then what does Saint Benedict tells us, right? Work and pray, and how your work is your prayer. So I'm just fascinated by the fact that your whole family, and again, how many kids do you have in your family?
We have 10 children. 10
children, right? Perfect Catholic guy, right?
No, not very far from that.
But I'm just
a regular
inspired.
person in the confession line.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I actually have an appointment scheduled this week. But I just love that you're incorporating your whole family in this process. And so the film's officially out. I want to talk about the impact that this film has already made. It premiered on EWTN. And since this film is, first of all, this film is free to watch. Is that right?
Yeah, so early on we decided that instead of getting investors to invest in the film, we would get benefactors to fund the film so that it would be completely free of charge after we completed it. We felt that it was important to get this out and distributed as fast as we could, as many people to see it as quickly as possible, and the best way to do that would be if it was free.
I think that's amazing, first of all. And so far, how many people have been able to see this film? I know you're not on the media world, but...
It was rolled out on Corpus Christi weekend on YouTube and social media and all that. So it's been about a month. And at this time, we've had about 40,000 people view it on YouTube and another 30,000 or so view it on our website. So about 70,000 people have probably seen the film in its first month.
That's incredible. Congratulations. No, that's a big deal.
Well, I'm
that's
trying to get to 70 million though,
there
so I'm
go.
a little bit impatient.
Well, in 1 month, 70,000. So friends, if you're watching this, you got to do your part here to not only watch it, but share the word. That's incredible though. I saw Scott Hahn was one of the people who shared it recently. And believe it or not, I saw Scott Hahn share it. And then I had a few people, probably unrelated to you, actually text me a link to check out this video. And I'm like, by the third or fourth person who said, yeah, I've already seen it. Yeah, I love it. And I'm like, wow, this movie really is gaining some momentum. This film is really increasing reach. So when I just to encourage you, since you're not on the social media world, when I have 3-4 different people sending me stuff unrelated, not in the same circle, that's a pretty good sign.
Well, the hope is that when people see it, it has not only an impact for them, but that it is something that they want to share with their family and friends because it was that impactful to them.
Yeah, and look, I'm a convert to the Catholic faith, and if I wish I had something like this during my journey. I'm a very visual person, and by the grace of God, I was able to have eyes to see the Mass being played out in Scripture coming to life. That's a big part of my witness of coming to the faith. Not far from how Scott Hahn experienced it. I definitely saw revelation coming to life. Obviously, that comes from my own background of going through, a Master's of Divinity program, having a bachelor's degree in theology. When you can see the Scriptures coming to life in the Mass, first of all, that's just a gift. That was a gift already. And so I can really resonate with the importance of having a film like this, because I don't recall there being anything like this that's available. Maybe I'm wrong, but I have not seen anything like this. I feel like this is the first of its kind.
Well, I'm not aware that there was anything like it, which was why we wanted to do it. It's interesting that you talked about the Bible, because for non-Catholics, we thought it was very, very important to show quotes from the Bible during the Mass so that non-Catholics would see that what we do is very biblical, and there is the connection between what's in the Bible and what we're doing every time Mass is celebrated for not just non-Catholics, but particularly that non-Catholics would see that connection.
Yeah, so the purpose is really not just current Catholics that Pew Research study is referring to, but of course our brothers and sisters who have kind of become separated from us and whose desire we have to be united, right?
When I talk to marketing people, the first thing they say is, well, what's your target audience? And I tell them, think more like a shotgun than a rifle, because we really have multiple target audiences. For people that go to church every Sunday, we want them to have a greater understanding of what's going on at church. We want them to be at church not because they have to be there or because they feel like it's a sin if they're not there, but that they want to be there. Secondly, the next largest denomination are fallen away Catholics. And so if the people that are Catholic today have a greater understanding of what it is that we're doing and why we're doing it, they're less likely to become fallen away Catholics. Then you have people that have already left the church or that don't go to church regularly. So you want to show them and maybe give them a greater understanding to where they start to miss what they used to have that they don't have anymore, to try and draw them back. Also, if they're going to a different Christian faith now, thinking that, well, they're still meeting their Sunday obligation and we're still doing basically the same thing, I want them to understand, no, the preaching can be better over there, the music can be better over there, you can tell me it's more welcoming, you can tell me it's more kid-friendly, but it's not the same thing that we're doing in the Catholic Church. And so I just want to help people to see that and to be able to understand that.
That's so important. So two things come to mind. First, I've been thinking a lot lately about the fruit of this 3-year Eucharistic revival. So this film actually really is one of the fruits that comes out of this Eucharistic revival,
Yes.
which is really beautiful. And I think that needs to be the next conversation piece in our community, right? The United States Catholic Conference of Bishops, is what are the fruits now of this beautiful 3-year revival, right? A lot of prayer went into before, a lot of prayer was put, into the really in the heat of it, but now what, right? We have this great revival. We end in Annapolis with this amazing, convention. This is just one of many, I'm sure, stories of incredible fruit that comes out of this revival. And so I love that this is coming as a result of that. And I think this needs to be talked about more, number one. But at the same time, I want to say that I'm also noticing that while the revival piece is always ongoing, but that 3-year period's over, we're seeing the fruits. I'm starting to see the other side of this, which is the real tension that's meeting this. Those that are really opposing the idea of the theology of the real presence. Recently, I've come across multiple sermons that have been shared with me from non-denominational churches, other Protestant churches, Reformed churches, where they're actually using the pulpit to completely slander what we do in the Mass. I recently shared a clip of this not too long ago, and it wasn't shared as a let's go and beat these guys up. It was really a grieving post. I shared it, and really it brought me to a place of it really grieved me. I felt sorry for him who was preaching this message. I felt sorry for the 30,000 or more sitting in that congregation listening to it. But he used reference to the Mass, and he literally starts off by saying, "How is Jesus? Is Jesus really present in the Eucharist?" And it was a rhetorical question, obviously. And he goes on to say, "Of course not. Jesus is physically seated at the right hand of the Father." And then he goes on this tangent about, where magicians get the word hocus pocus from? It's from Roman Catholics. When they were holding up the communion bread and they said the Latin word for, and he made up something to sound really close to hocus pocus, like corpus corpus. Yeah, hocus corpus, hocus pocus. And he's trying to make a joke. But his point was to educate his flock, his sheep, that we're essentially doing something that we think is magical, and that this is where the magic world gets these ideas from. And it led to, in my opinion, just a completely divisive narrative. And it didn't end there, right? I come to find there were multiple sermons that really were leading up to this and criticizing and attacking this idea. And it's not just this church, but really it's a growing thing I'm seeing outside the Catholic churches. There's almost like an intense increase in we need to go oppose this. It's almost like maybe they see the momentum. They can sense that, oh man, they're gaining some traction here. We really need to put them in their place and explain to them how this is just completely bogus. So I bring this up because I see both things parallel. I see this amazing fruit that's coming from these prayers, this revival, but at the same time I'm seeing an increase of just total tension, hatred, divisiveness. And this is where I think a ministry like yours, this film, those that are really taking, their baton and doing what they can with their witness is so important, because this is a growing concern, at least that I'm seeing. And I know you're not on media, but I'm telling you, this is a hot topic right now.
Well, God gives us free will. So we have the ability to believe and listen to whoever we think is telling us the truth. But as I was listening to you, I was reflecting back to when Christ was alive. And he was Jewish, and he was teaching among the Jewish people, and he was trying to show them and teach them the truth. And a large portion of the people rejected his teaching and disputed him, and even said that what he was teaching was coming from Satan. It wasn't from God, and he was God. So this isn't something new, and this isn't something that we're just having to fight today. It's been going on for over 2,000 years, and that's not going to stop. What we do know is that deep down in man's heart, he's searching for the truth. God puts that desire in each one of us. And we don't know what conversation, what video clip, what time that person is going to be open to the truth, hear it, and respond to it. But we can just each play our little part and our little role and leave the rest of it really to God's divine plan.
What a great piece of advice. I think that's really important. There are many who have made it their mission to become Catholic apologists. And thanks to things like YouTube and social media, what we're seeing more than ever is that there is a rise of Catholic apologists that are really doing a wonderful job of being a voice. For a long time, I feel like, again, especially from an outsider looking at the Catholic Church, I felt like the Catholic Church has had to play defense for 2,000 years. And it seems like for one of the first times, at least in my experience, we can see a beautiful evolution of the lay church answering their call and going on mission and proclaiming the beauty, the goodness, the truth of what we believe. And so I appreciate the fact that, you answered your yes and you went forth with this project, because it's timely. It really is so timely to see something like this and to do it so well. I think that's one thing that Catholics should focus on is quality, right? We love beautiful Catholic churches, and we love the beauty and the art. And I think that quality isn't the most important thing, but it's definitely a beautiful thing to see when something is done well.
Well, I've got to thank the Bartons for that, because I can have all the great ideas in the world, but it was their knowledge and their expertise to be able to take the Mass that we filmed and to take the interviews that we recorded and add music and add this and add that and put it all together to come up with what you see as the finished product.
That's amazing. Yeah, it's really cool to see how God really assembled that. So I would love for you to talk about, one, how can people view this project? What is your vision for this project, and how do you I know you want to get to 70 million people, but what's the plan? How do we get this into more people? What's the vision that you have moving forward?
So first of all, it's available on our website, which is www.therealpresence.com, so people can watch it there. People can also watch it on YouTube. If you just punch in The Real Presence movie or film or whatever, it pops up pretty quickly. One of the things we'd like to do in the fall when school starts back is try and promote it to the different dioceses. We believe it's a great tool for educational resource, middle school, high school age in particular, preparation for sacraments, OCIA programs. We think it's very, very helpful when showing people that are doing that walk toward the faith, the Mass. So we think it can be used a lot there. We're in the process right now of translating it into Spanish.
Wow.
EWTN has told us if we could get them a Spanish version, they would put it on their Spanish network that goes to Central and South America and to Spain.
Wow.
They've also told us if we could do it in Italian and German and French and Polish, that they have television throughout Europe, that they would put it on there as well. So we'll see if the Lord leads us in that direction, but I have a funny feeling He is. Right now, word of mouth and people sharing it and spreading it through social media and emailing it and texting it seems to be the way that's generating the most excitement. So we would ask people to do that, to try and help us to disseminate it that way as well.
For those who want to take a step further and really become an ambassador of this project, what's the best way that they can really get involved? Maybe there's another level there. How can someone become an ambassador for this project?
So on our website, there's actually a link to becoming an ambassador where the Bartons and they will communicate by email, and the Bartons will kind of give them tools that they need to go out and maybe help spread the word about the movie even more than normal. So that's another way that people can help. But we see this just as another tool for evangelization that hopefully people can use to, you know, our society's become so visual. When I was young, I learned most things from a book. My kids tend to learn more things through videos and programs on television, the History Channel, and they have a totally different way of learning, and it's very visual. And so one of the great things I think about this film is it allows people to visually see what we do and understand what we do and learn that way.
I couldn't agree more. Well, Joe, thank you so much for joining me and giving me an opportunity to hear more about the behind the scenes, you know, for sharing this story. For those of you watching this episode, I highly recommend taking a look at this film. It's incredible. And like Joe said, please pass this along, visit the website. All of that information will be in the show notes for this episode, and you can visit the website link directly in the description. But Joe, thank you once again for being with me, for inviting me to this amazing studio with all these amazing historical artifacts and all the fun to meet the Bartons. I really appreciate that today. This was a lot of fun.
Well, thank you for having me.
Thank you guys once again for joining me. Until next time, God bless.